Now, the 26th African Union Summit is still ongoing at the AU headquarters in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. The summit entered a critical phase after leaders from across the continent began crucial discussions around the human rights theme and other serious challenges facing the continent. Well, CCTV's team is on the ground in Addis Ababa, and we're now joined by Beatrice Marshall live for an update. Beatrice, what's the latest from Addis?
Mahia, thank you very much indeed, and welcome to the African Union here in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. It is the final day of the African Union Leadership Summit, and closed-door sessions are taking place throughout the day, culminating in resolutions that will be announced at the closing ceremony at the end of the day. Now, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon earlier held a press conference on the successes and challenges facing the African Union. One of the issues this whole week was Somalia. Ban Ki-moon spoke about that. It comes as leaders like Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta are pushing for a restructuring of the African Union mission to Somalia.
Consolidate the stability and peace and stability in Somalia, fighting back against this Al-Shabaab terrorist actions has been key concerns of the international community. There has been, as you said, progress and some setbacks, but largely the Somalia is going on right track. They are moving and they are making significant progress. I have urged the President of Somalia this morning that wherever they have been able to recover the territories from the control of Al-Shabaab, they should expand their administrative role and power as much as possible, and there should be good governance. United Nations, led by UNSOM and my special representative, are working very hard. We are ready to provide all the support.
Well, let's get you more now on those high-level meetings of the day and the press conference by UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. Girum Chala was following those proceedings for us this morning. He's joining me now outside the African Union headquarters. Girum, what more can you tell us from that press conference by the UN Secretary General?
Well, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon talked about other two important items. The first one is the reform both in the UN General Assembly and the Security Council. We remember yesterday at the opening of the African Union Heads of State Summit, the outgoing chairperson, Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe, called for reform at the UN Security Council, and Ban Ki-moon had a chance to explain his side of the story. He said there is already a process of reforming the way the United Nations operate to make everything there fair for all member states, including the African states. So he said this ongoing process will be making some kind of fruit sooner than later, as per the calls made by the African Union. The other topic that he has talked about is the situation in Burundi. Of course, we know that the African Union is delaying the sending of the troops of 5,000 military and police to the country. Rather, Ban Ki-moon also said that the political dialogue amongst Burundian stakeholders should be given a chance now to bring peace back to the nation, and will continue lobbying the presidency in Bujumbura for the moment, and the rest of it will be decided through time. So Ban Ki-moon literally talked about these important points in his press conference.
Well, Somalia is topping the agenda at the African Union here today. Girum, and there are calls from presidents, particularly Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta, for the restructuring of the AMISOM force. Where will the funding for that come from?
Now, strengthening AMISOM is a vital thing for the African Union, even for all member states of the continent, especially for the countries of the region. Uhuru Kenyatta of Kenya, as he was saying that if AMISOM is strengthened, then it's easier to defeat Al-Shabaab in the country and avoid any terrorist acts from not only Somalia, but also in general in the region. And it looks like his comments have ground. in 2014, there is also an agreement here that in 2014, the attack against AMISOM, the offensive against AMISOM was stronger than 2015 last year. And that's why perhaps Al-Shabaab is now gaining momentum and attacking every now and then, even claiming some spots in Somalia, again, taking them away from AMISOM and Somali forces. So there is a need to strengthen the AMISOM forces in the country to not only fight on the ground, but also on sea and air. Now, when we talk about funding, funding comes from two directions. One, obviously, is from the nations of the continent, especially the region, and the United Nations. The UN has been a strong ally of AMISOM by providing ammunitions and whatever financial support it needs, and that needs to be strengthened. That's what even Mr. Ban Ki-moon was saying. AMISOM needs to be strengthened, and the Somali government needs to take responsibility in taking the peace gained further.
Well, quite a lot of side meetings still going on here, and bilateral meetings as well between the various heads of state. Girum, can you give us a rundown of what sessions we are expecting this afternoon, and exactly what resolutions are we expecting at the end of the day?
Well, today is the final day of the 26th African Union Heads of State Summit. There were lots of things on the table, ranging from peace and security issues to development agendas of Agenda 2063. You understand that this 2016 is also an important year for the AU because the 10 years implementation of that 50 years plan is going to begin this year. So today we're expecting also reports from Liberia's President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf for the heads of state, for her to deliver the post-2015 Millennium Development Agenda African Common Position report for the heads of state to approve, and then perhaps show the way for the future, how Africa needs to be compatible with the just confirmed and the just adopted sustainable development goals of the whole world. Then the African share is obviously expected to be magnified in accordance with Agenda 2063. The rest, we are expecting the African Union resolution when it comes to the final day. It is about what the AU Assembly has decided in all sectors, ranging from South Sudan, Burundi, and development agendas. As I was saying, that is expected end of business tonight here in the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa, out of the summit going on now.
And of course, several key events were seen yesterday. Most notable was a speech by the outgoing chair, President Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe. Charles Idris Deby took over that position for 2016. CCTV's Robert Nagila takes us through an overview of yesterday's proceedings.
The opening ceremony of the AU Leadership Summit was certainly not a boring one. UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon acknowledged the importance of African charters.
I urge you to move on from setting standards to what I call the 3 I's: implementation, institution building, and investment.
But then Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe took to the podium and spoke about the ongoing issue of UN Security Council reforms.
But the bosses in the Security Council say you shall never have the powers that we have as permanent members. And we have asked and asked and asked. And asked and asked. Reform the Security Council.
It was his last speech as AU chair, and President Mugabe certainly made sure it was a memorable one. Later, Mugabe handed over the chairmanship to Chadian President Idris Deby with just a moment of levity. Robert Nagila, CCTV, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
And that's it from us here at the African Union. Sideline meetings and bilateral meetings still continuing throughout the day. The closing ceremony will be later in the day, and we are expecting key resolutions here at the African Union. Of course, Somalia, Burundi dominating the agenda for the past 2 days. We'll bring you more on that after the closing ceremony. For now, back to Mahia in studio. Mahia.
Thank you, Beatrice. Beatrice Marshall heading up our team on the ground in Ethiopia on the final day of the 26th African Union Heads of State Summit that is ongoing in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.